into confined waters and hazardous areas fully automatically, and perhaps remove some of the human element problems that we have seen so graphically demonstrated in this morning's presentations.
I'll respond to the initial question, what is the role of automation? As I see it, it would be to take on the tasks that the human operator is not good at, and in particular monitoring an unchanging or very slowly changing situation. The human being is not very good at that. The machine can do that. What the human being is good at is assessing the situation and coming to a decision. But again, the machine can support them in that by providing the options and doing some background analysis. So I would see the role of automation as being support, decision support, and situational awareness rather than taking over from the human being.
And Seamus, isn't your question really supporting or moving to the e-navigation environment, that on board and ashore the information is displayed in a way or presented in a way that avoids confusion and makes it almost impossible to misunderstand or misinterpret the information you're being given? Is that in the area of the automation you're thinking of, or is that something that the e-navigation committee looking at? Bill, is that the way we're going with e-navigation from IALA's perspective, the proper presentation of information in accordance with the definition? Any other comments? David?
Yes, I mean, in risk management terms, of course, if that's a risk, then you should remove the human element. That you can't do it, and I absolutely agree with not what Nick says there. The problem with automation, though, is it actually turns the operator into a monitor, and of course that monitor can then become distracted. There are other accident reports that suggest that the officer of the watch, I mean, let's face it, when the ship is at sea, it is almost in automatic then. It's because they've got it in automatic pilot, and you've heard the stories of there, what goes wrong when the automatic pilot's not set up properly, etc., etc. And so if you've got that situation, then the officer of the watch, who's supposed to be monitoring all this, gets distracted. And we've seen examples where he's busy doing his paperwork or what have you. But I cannot see, and I've asked around a lot of people who are very much involved in this, if they believe that automation will eventually take over. And the answer is no. And one of the problems is that what's being lost is basically nautical and engineering common sense on board ship, which you will always need.
Thanks, David. There's a question over there.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for very good presentations also. When we look at the aviation industry, there are still 2 pilots, at least at those planes I take. But I know that if I go into a Boeing 737, I know that the pilot is trained and educated, instruments is standardized. So aren't there potential for more standardization, more focus on training? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go back to Nick again, who's the standardization guru. If you want to talk about what prospects we have for better standardization.
Well, I'm far from being a human elements expert, but I acknowledge that training is crucial, and we do, as the engineers among us should always add that to the end of the list of things that we're going to do, is train the user. But from the standardization point of view, we can do a great deal, and the point I was making about standard interfaces can be extended to the standardization of information exchange, which a number of speakers will be talking about later. so that the information is presented in a format that the user can understand and appreciate without too much puzzling over it. So yes, there is clearly a role for standardisation, but as far as the training is concerned, I would defer to other speakers here who know a lot more about that than I do.
I think it means you, Terry. Any comment on the training aspect?
Yes, I think training, of course, is very important, and a lot of people join a ship sometimes with very few hours' notice, and the ship's sailing, and they just don't get trained in the equipment that they're being used. One thing about aircraft, of course, don't forget that the standardisation of equipment usually applies to an aircraft type, whereas ships are so diversified, changing owners all the time and doing this and that. It's very, very difficult to standardise equipment. I would agree that in a perfect world, yes. Training, well, we always need training, and unfortunately some ship owners will not train unless they have to train because they're cost-cutting all the time.
Thank you. Again, I think that brings up the e-navigation concept. The standardisation of presentation information is the key element, or a key element in the architecture for e-navigation. Bill's nodding, I'm doing okay. We have time for one more question. Yes, sir. Over there, behind you.
Thank you very much. My name is Knut Benedikt from Maritime Simulation Center Warnemünde. Would you think that, talking about standardization, e-navigation, that the inclusion of the commanded values of rudder, engine and others should be an element of at least voyage data recorders and also AIS, because that would allow a real predictive, let's say, decision making if you really know what the other ships are really doing, what they're looking for.
Thank you for that. Any volunteers? You finished them, you can't answer. I agree with you, I think you're absolutely right. But I bow to my technological geniuses who are lined up before you who don't have an answer. Dick, you calling us that? Again, I love picking them.
I'm sure it can be done technically, but can you rely on the other person to interpret that information correctly and make the right decision? That would be my concern.
Yeah. Do you want to come back on that stool? Yes, I thought you might.
Only one comment. It would also allow, if you make accident investigations afterwards, that you might know what the parties involved has really done, which is not possible for the moment.
Thank you. David, final comment on investigations?
I think, and it's been mentioned in the last couple of days actually, that some accident investigations maybe aren't as thorough as others. I'll get shot by some of my members for saying that, I expect. But it is true. But I think the process of accident investigation now is such that it will improve. You've heard from an earlier speaker about the investigation with the Costa Busan, and the National Transport Safety Board and indeed the UK MAIB have developed an investigation suite that actually takes into account all these things that you're talking about. And they freely offer the availability of that suite to all our members. Some of them use them, some of them don't, some of them developing their own, so that they can bring all the other elements into the investigation. So it will get better in the future.
Thank you, David. I have now the duty of repeating my notices before we thank our speakers, and that's: could heads of delegation please contact Mary Ellen in room 172? Could speakers please check your presentations with the AV team in room 173? Don't forget tea and coffee is served in the exhibition hall in a minute. And don't forget to hand in your question sheets with the necessary so that we can deal with them in due course. Thank you for your questions. Thank you, presentation team, for your presentations. Can we thank them in the traditional way? So So that concludes session 1. It's coffee break now for 30 minutes. Do try and be back at 11 o'clock. Thank you very much.